Hi everyone, this is Dr. Kingston, and in this video we're going to be covering melanin and skin color. Our objectives for this video here are going to be, number one, to describe the production and distribution of melanin in the skin. We're going to talk especially about how it can vary between individuals and how it will vary within individuals. And once we've got done the basics of that, we'll take a look at how UV exposure can change pigmentation of the skin. And talk about some changes that could indicate skin cancer. All right, so melanin, what is it? It's a pigment. So it is a little particle that is going to give our epidermal cells, hair cells, things like anything in the epidermis, a specific color. Now these are found throughout epidermal cells. They are created by the melanocytes, which remember are our big weird shaped cells with lots of tentacles down here in stratum basale. And they are shared then with the keratinocytes. Okay, and those are the cells that make up most of our epidermal cells all the way up to the top. All right, the way this happens is through little organelles of the melanocytes called melanosomes. So these are going to synthesize, store, and transport melanin, meaning they're going to make it and then they are going to pass it. So they pinch off a little package like this and send it into the keratinocytes. Okay, so these little tentacle bits are going to pinch off little pieces of themselves, and then those little pieces are what gets transferred into the keratinocytes. They do this to shield the nuclei of the keratinocytes from UV rays. So melanin can absorb UV radiation, and it also is going to neutralize some free radicals floating around in the skin after UV exposure. So it's good for your skin in two ways. There is a lot of variation in skin color because we are talking about different concentrations of pigment, right? So we have differences between individuals, so our base color can be different from person to person. This is caused by differences in the type of melanin that may be in individuals' skin, as well as differences in the concentration of melanin in the skin. We also see differences, though, within individuals. So this might be getting a tan in the summer, or it could be having freckles or moles or other patches of highly pigmented skin. This is typically due to differences in pigment production rates across time, and it can also be a difference in melanocyte concentration from one region of skin to the next. All right, so let's start off here by talking about these differences between individuals. All right, so it's important to note here that melanin is the main driver of skin color differences, but we also have some others. Keratin, one, yes, same stuff that you find in carrots. If you eat a keratin heavy diet, your fat will start to be a lot more orange and your skin can start to look more orange too. So all those jokes people used to make when you're in grade school about turning orange from eating carrots, it can actually happen. Probably won't, but it could. And the other big one here is hemoglobin. So if you've had a chance to come into our anatomy labs here, you've probably noted that our donors that have been embalmed look very gray. And this is because there is no longer hemoglobin or blood sitting just beneath the surface of their skin. That has all been pushed out by the embalming fluid. All right, so it makes a big difference. All right, so within melanin, though, because that's the big one we're talking about here too, we have two types. So we have eumelanin. U means true, so true melanin produces a brown-black hue. There's also pheomelanin, which is a little bit different. It's not as dark, and it produces a yellowish red-orange type of shade. All right. Differences between these can, number one, be the shade, so brown, black, or yellow, red. But more often what we're seeing when we see differences in skin tone is differences in melanin concentration. So for melanocytes, so that's the cells that produce our melanin, we tend to see pretty equal numbers across different populations. So populations around the equator tend to have the same number of these as populations really far north or really far south. What we do see, though, is that they are much more active in people with darker skin. So they're producing a lot more melanin. And you can see this illustrated here, too. The dark-skinned example has a lot of little melanin pigments being made in its melanocyte here, where the light-skinned individual, and I assume this is supposed to be a pheomelanin packet rather than a eumelanin packet, has a lot less melanin being produced. All right, so that's between individuals. Within individuals, one of the most noticeable changes in skin color happens because your skin tans. What happens in this process is that the melanocytes, so our pigment producing cells, it's here, or we got a big one right here, I'll go with the big one, they are producing all of this pigment to shield the nuclei of keratinocytes from UV rays. But on occasion, UV rays can get in and actually damage the melanocyte themselves, and they're very sensitive to this. When this happens, it starts releasing melanocyte-stimulating hormone. So yes, it releases its own hormone to start production here. This results in a temporary increase in production of melanin, so it starts kicking itself into overdrive, producing more and more pigment. And then it's going to deliver extra melanosomes in stratum basale, okay? So what you're seeing here in this picture, we're seeing extra bits of melanin being deposited into stratum basale, and that will produce a darker tone for the skin. Eventually, though, because the epidermis sheds every 4 to 6 weeks, these same cells will work their way up and out, and the skin tone will go back to the normal lighter shade. The other differences we see within individuals have to do more with where the pigment is located and how it's concentrated. So we have freckles, and there are two defined types here. So freckles as a group are defined as small flat areas where you have a lot of concentrated melanin production going on. These can be ephelides, which are light freckles. You usually have them from birth, and they tend to darken and lighten in response to UV exposure. So if you have very light coloration, maybe red or blonde hair, you might have these that come out, get real dark in response to UV exposure, and then go back down. Lentiginous are a little bit different. So these are the bigger freckles that you tend to develop as you age. You're not born with these. These are benign skin growths that have really heavy pigmentation to them. So things like liver spots or age spots. You're at the age now where you will probably start seeing these pop up after you're outside in the summer. They first show up as a bright red spot and then eventually darken into something that looks kind of like but not quite a mole. Now, moles are something specific, so they're also called annavus, and they are a protruding spot. So that's the big difference between moles and freckles. Moles protrude, and they are a benign overgrowth of melanocytes. So those octopus cells that produce the melanin, when they overgrow in one spot, they start pushing up on each other like this and produce a mole. Okay, a melanoma is very similar to a mole, except instead of being a benign overgrowth, it is a malignant overgrowth of melanocytes. So these look very characteristically different from a normal mole, and I do love that this calls it a beauty spot. So beautiful. So you notice here we have a pretty smooth outline, fairly small mole. A malignant growth from a mole then starts to look asymmetrical. So we go from having a nice shape here to having kind of a unpredictable shape here. We might see irregular outlines, okay, and this can take several different forms. So remember, Those melanocyte cells have kind of a funny shape to them. They got lots of parts that stick out, so they can kind of glom onto each other and grow in different directions. We might see several different colors start to appear here, and moreover, they will grow to a very large diameter. So melanoma tends to spread really rapidly if not treating. These are a very active cell. They're usually producing things, so they can grow very rapidly. All right, so keep these signs in mind and watch your moles. All right, and now for one question here to test what you've learned. True or false? Individuals with dark skin have a greater number of melanocytes than individuals with pale skin. That is false. Everybody tends to have right around the same number of melanocytes. People with dark skin tend to have much more active melanocytes, so they are pushing more pigment out into the epidermis. All right, and that is going to bring us to the end. Thank you for joining me.